Good afternoon. It is the June 18th Utilities Committee meeting, and it looks like all are present. On the agenda, there has been requested change that we move up a topic that was headed decisions regarding replacement of lead lines. And I'd like to move that up to the top of the schedule, and we'll address that first. With the first thing we'll do, of course, is make sure that we have a quorum, and I believe that everyone is here. Alan was here, myself, and Marilyn. I would move that we request that we approve the minutes from the May 8th meeting. That's part of a normal procedure.
I will motion to approve the meetings.
Second.
Okay, looks like we have a majority. I agree, so it's unanimous. The topic of decisions is, as I mentioned to everyone, is that as the water main is going to be replaced on Sharon Avenue, there will be a number of older homes, approximately 70, of which some are going to have lead lines identified. And there is an opportunity for replacement of those lead lines by the contractor at a fixed cost per household of about $2,000. The question is, at this point, who should bear the cost of that replacement? The options are the owner will be responsible. The options would be that the village could be responsible, or the village could pay in part of that cost. And I don't know if there's some other options, Wally, that you might have to offer, but I will ask for your input on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that was a very good description. I might enhance this a little bit. We met with Rack and Ballinger with our engineers several days ago. They're ready to start. As you know, the Ohio Water Development Authority has funded the entire project as a 1.37% loan. And before they proceed, they need guidance from the village on what the disposition will be on the lead lines that are from the curb box, which is at the sidewalk, and then into the people's homes. We are already designed to pay for them. The whole plan, the loan included us doing that, but I will not do that unless that is the direction of the committee. So no legislation is needed, but direction is needed. There are 78 homes that connect to the Sharon Road water main replacement. The meets and bounds of the project are from Chester Road to the town hall, where it will connect into the new main that goes from the town hall to the water tower. Of these 7 homes, we do not know which ones are lead. We do not know which ones are copper. And the reason is people have in the past replaced their lines voluntarily, and they do so using Hamilton County plumbing permit, not the village of Glendale. So we suspect we'll find half of them as lead, or maybe a third of them lead. So while we budgeted $150,000 and we're funded for it at $2,000 per house, as you stated, we by no means will incur $150,000 in expenses if we were to pay for all of them. Let me briefly state my position on this and my recommendation from my years of experience. Throughout my career in overseeing the water department here, the EPA has annually increased unfunded mandates to us. Some of them are doable, some of them are beyond our means, and we've had to raise water rates. We've had to get low interest or no interest loans to meet these unfunded mandates. I believe from past experience that the lead lines that are privately owned from the sidewalk to the house at some point will be mandated by the Ohio EPA to be removed within a certain period of time. I don't know if that will happen in 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, but I believe it's forthcoming. The Greater Cincinnati Water Works has adopted a policy in anticipation of being required to remove these lead lines, whether the city has to do it or the village or the resident will be mandated, but either way we think it will happen. they've adopted a policy of providing $1,500 of financial assistance to remove a lead water line from the sidewalk to the house. Even with that assistance, they find that the compliance, the request to go ahead and proceed and remove them is rather low, sometimes in the 35 to 45% of a project. When they dig up the street, they notify residents, which we have already done, digging up the road and replacing the lead line from the main to the sidewalk. And that if we discover that your line is lead, we will notify you. And that would be a good opportunity at a very low cost, which, by the way, is quoted $2,000 per household, no matter how long the front yard is, to remove. The point I make is that if once they're done, if we don't replace the lead line and then it is mandated, you're looking at between $6,000 and $8,000 to remove these lines, whether the city is mandated, the village, or if the homeowner is mandated. So this is a very economical opportunity to remove these lines now at a very low cost because we're dealing in volume. I would propose that the committee consider offering some type of assistance ranging from paying the whole thing, as we're prepared to do now, if you wish, or offering an allowance of $1,000 or $1,500. $1,500 would match Cincinnati's policy, by the way. And you might ask me what happens in the future when we do other mains, or if a resident discovers they have a lead line in their yard. I think that's a policy that we honor going into the future, that we offer whatever allowance it is that we're talking about today. A typical homeowner will pay $6,000 to $8,000 to individually replace it, and maybe we can give them a credit of that on their water bill over 2 years to offer them that incentive and that allowance. The most important thing I'll say to you before I stop is that these lead lines are connected to our water main. Now, water normally flows from our water main to the house. During periods of low pressure, such as the main break, that flow can reverse. You then introduce water that was in their lead line back into our main. And that might be the reason the Ohio EPA might at some point mandate they all be removed in the future. So with that, I would be happy to entertain any questions and open up the discussion if that's agreeable to you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, please do. Let's open it up for discussion.
Yeah. Well, Wally, I got a question. Do you think the Ohio is going to require backflow preventers at some time?
Well, they are already required on new homes, correct me?
Yep.
On the hose bibs.
Okay.
And
Sprinkler systems.
and sprinkler systems. Thank you, Kelly. Yep. I don't know if a backflow preventer installed where a lead line meets our main is even possible without re-excavating. That's a good question. I do not have the answer for that, sir.
Let me ask Wally. I'm sorry, Alan. I did not mean to interrupt you.
Okay, I just wanted to know one more thing on that. If they can mandate that the lead pipe be removed, they can definitely mandate that there also is added a backflow preventer to the new construction of the new pipe. Is that feasible, or is that kind of my own?
I'm looking over at Kevin. I think we both agree that they can pretty much mandate anything, and they have mandated backflow preventers on sprinkler systems and hose bibs. So potentially, yes, they could.
So if we would do a condition that whoever has lead pipe, even though it's not the village's responsibility, it's the homeowner's responsibility, and they may be mandated to have both new pipe and a backflow preventer, that's going to be a whole lot more than the $2,000.
I would think that if, and I don't know if a backflow preventer solves a lead to our water main connection, but I would think that if you remove the lead, replace it with plastic or copper, then no backflow preventer would be required on a water line, but yet it would on a sprinkler, of course, because they're dealing with outside contaminants. Mm-hmm. According to Cincinnati Water Works and to our engineer, the best practice is to replace the lead line, get it unattached to our water main.
Okay, and then the when the backflow preventer comes with a annual or triannual fee for licensing of that, is that something that then would be required for all homes?
Kevin,
Right now we have, I don't know, we have pretty many backflow preventers throughout the village. A lot of them, Crothers Pond, we have irrigation systems. And Hamilton County actually watches over that for us, and they send me a letter who is not compliance, and then we send them out letters to make sure that they do comply, because the EPA does, when they do their triennial checks with us, they do make sure everybody's in compliance. And we have probably 12 or 13 in the village itself that we pay for. And they're about $100 or so a test.
Yeah, but if they can mandate, I'm just looking forward to say every home in Glendale could be responsible to install a backflow preventer and pay an annual fee to the MSD or somebody.
what I can do, Mr. Howeller, is reach out to Mr. Mariana, who is our representative with the Ohio EPA, and ask him about what the future might look like for backflow preventers. But I do not know of any community, nor is the engineer aware that a backflow preventer resolves the problem of a lead line.
Yeah, I understand it. I'm just, the village of Terrace Park is getting a sewer system for the first time in their history. And every house that hooks into it is going to be required to have non-lead pipes, of course, and a backflow preventer from the other side of the meter, I guess it is. I don't remember what my son-in-law said, but it's the backflow preventer is going to have to be between the intake and the meter. Is that what I'm seeing, Kevin?
Yeah, you can pretty, yeah, that's probably where they would put it, is back before that meter. Or it could be after the meter. If they're outside meters, you can still put them in. I think I do.
Mr. Hoeller, I know that new homes are required to have backflow preventers and older homes are grandfathered, but as you know, that could change. Right now, that's the way it stands.
A backflow preventer is about $800, something like that.
Yeah, depending on the size.
How much?
Depending on the size of the line.
Yeah.
200, you know, up there. You can buy them at Lowe's, like 3/4 inch, I believe, for, I think they're like a couple $100 maybe, or something like that.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Alan,
Marilyn. Go ahead.
thank you. I also would like to follow up on the backflow preventer and the cost that I heard Wally give us a briefing on. So Kevin, I just heard you say a backflow preventer ranges and $800 is the outer limit. What's the lower limit, depending on the size of the line?
Are you talking about water? Or are we talking about like sewer? Just to clarify.
I'd like to follow up on what Alan was speaking and just keep it simple right now. I think we're talking about water. Is that correct, Alan?
Yes.
Okay, so water, yeah, they're range somewhere around like that low range. I think they're like close to $200 at, like, you can get them at Lowe's even 3/4 inch. Pretty sure backflow preventer at Lowe's.
But then you have to install.
Yeah, then you got to get installed, and yeah, you're probably looking just be around $800 or so. Alan's probably pretty close to that, getting installed and everything.
So if then, Wally, we are looking at the Cincinnati $1,500 financial assistance to remove the lead lines.
Correct.
To your knowledge, then if there were a backflow preventer installed, would that make the cost somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, $2,000 for a Glendale homeowner, plus say $800 for the
I do want to
backflow?
go on record that a backflow preventer is not acceptable to the Ohio EPA when lead lines are connected.
I'm struggling to hear you, Wally, if you could speak up a little louder.
I wanted to go on record that the Ohio EPA does not recognize backflow preventers as remediating lead lines from the main to the house. They require them to be removed to the curb stop. And my prediction is they will eventually require them to be removed from the curb stop, which is the sidewalk, to the house. And that's what I wanted to emphasize. It's an interesting idea Mr. Poehler has. Would a backflow preventer suffice? I don't have any engineering data on that or EPA discussion on that, but it's not on the table of any communities I know of. It's required on new houses to prevent fertilizers and contaminants from the ground to get into your hose when you're irrigating. So it's very effective for that. But as far as preventing someone's water that's inside of their lead line getting back into our main, I don't believe that's on the table as an option at this time. But as Mr. Hurler said, it could be down the road. But now we're dealing with, we must remove the lead lines from the main to the curb stop. And we need to notify the residents that they should do that for their health and for the health of our residents should the water back up during a low pressure situation.
Okay, so let me just quickly recap in one sentence. I hear you saying the backflow preventer currently is not required. However, if the homeowner were to have it installed, it could cost an additional $200 to $800 for the cost of the device plus the installation.
I believe that's what Kevin said, yes.
All right, thank you.
I got one more question for you, Kevin and Wally.
Yeah.
We're going to get, where did you said we had 120,000 coming from the state?
No, sir. The Ohio Water Development Authority gave us our loan just north of $2 million to do this project. Within the scope of the project, we maximized our exposure to how many lead lines we'll find to the number of houses that are connected to the main that's being replaced. That number is 78. We by no means think we'll find 78 lead lines, but we're prepared to
Okay.
find the full replacement for every house should by some oddity all of them become lead.
Well, would we be out of line to suggest that money, I mean, we're borrowing that money from the state, correct?
It's a line of credit, yes, sir.
And then, so of the 1,000 homes in Glendale, we're going to spend that much money on just 78 homes potentially? Not even 1% or 10% of our homes? Is that correct?
Potentially. Unlikely, but potentially, yes.
Okay. So then the rest of the village is going to end up paying for the interest in what we have to pay back for the 78 homes. It's going to be, the rest of us are going to end up paying for the 78 homes when it's actually that homeowner's property that's responsible for that money.
Yes.
Is that, Mr. Mayor, are you catching that?
Yes, you're correct. Although I think we should recognize here that if we decide to do this replacement and fund it, we would be making a policy decision that we would do so as we replace water mains for any lead lines attached to those water mains. So we will be replacing other water mains, and some of them will have lead lines attached to them, some of them will not. When we find, but we have to recognize that we are setting a policy here that we do not want lead lines attached to our mains, and that if we find them, we will we will pay to replace them. We could also require that the owner replace them and bear the cost. So that's our choice.
Or do nothing.
There's also the option of offering incentive where they pay part and we offer a flat incentive and keep it a uniform price, as does Cincinnati Water Works.
Yeah, well,
Wally, I'd like
I guess I'm opposed to the rest of the village paying for the old houses renovations of something that's actually on their property that is their responsibility. I can see where we help them out. I can see where we do a partial credit for whatever they have to do. But if you live over somewhere that's got a new house and you've already paid to have this done, I think it'd be a hard sell to say, by the way, you're paying for all these old houses that had lead pipes in them, even though that's the responsibility of the homeowner.
Let me explore a comment you made because I think it's interesting. You said a credit. So one way we have to do this is that the owner pays for the whole thing. And that because I think it's important to offer them incentive to get participation rates higher. Due to the poor experience Cincinnati's had without incentives, that possibly we offer them a credit on their water bill over a 2-year period to give them that incentive. What that amount is, I don't know. Maybe it is $1,500, maybe it's $1,000. But Cincinnati has found through 3 years of doing this now that by offering incentives, they get a greater level of participation to get these lead lines off the mains and out of the people's homes.
So for the committee folks, just a question. So if we lean forward and do that, will the village offer up a schedule on when the other water mains and therefore lead lines will be addressed? Because if I'm a resident and I just found out that the village is paying for replacement of lead lines, I want to know when I'm on the schedule for that.
I think later on in this meeting, we're going to talk about our loss ratio of water pumped to water metered. And I think during that discussion, we'll talk about the condition of the 100-plus-year-old mains in the village, and that how do we identify which mains are leaking so that we can create a list and prioritize which mains should be replaced. As the mayor mentioned before, when we do start replacing other mains, now that we have the water increase to help pay for it, we will find more lead lines. So I think.
Wally, could I ask you, Kevin and you, how many homes of the 1,000 or 1,100 that we have are newer and already have regular copper pipe or plastic pipe? Do you have a percentage for me? Just a.
I'm looking at my historic district map, Mr. Howeller, and I can tell you that everything in the yellow have homes that have a likelihood of having lead mains. These are older homes. Believe in the late 30s, early 40s, that lead was discontinued. So if your house was built prior to the late 30s, early 40s, it's unlikely that it has lead mains. Now, I want to point out that, as I said earlier, a lot of people have replaced their lead lines because they failed or because I identified them as lead and they didn't want that. So everything in the historic district, and that's where our old 100-year-old mains are. All the other subdivisions like Warwick, Heatherington, they all have new mains. They're in good shape. There's no lead lines there, but it's the older side of town that's problematic, similar to Flint.
And I'd say that's about 40% of the village.
I wouldn't argue that.
So you might be looking at 400 homes approximately that might be in jeopardy of having to do the piping, and if it's $2,000, that's 800,000. We only going to get 120. That there might have to be some phases on this. That and what I'm saying is, if you say there's going to be 400 homes that perhaps could use it, I would take the 120 and divide it by 400, and the 100. If that is, I don't remember. I can't do the math off my top of my head, but that's about $300 a home.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is a discount or a credit or we will pay the first $300 of this repair. I think that's fair to everybody that's going to have it, except for the people that have new homes. They're still going to pay for the interest on what we have to spend in the village to get this. And I understand that because I live in one of the old homes. Marilyn, you live in a new home, but Mike Bessel lives in an old home. And it's kind of like, I will pay for my home. And Marilyn's lucky she's already got a new home. She doesn't have lead pipes. So it's kind of like, I think the property owner is still responsible for it no matter how we look at it. And I think the $120,000 we're getting from the Ohio to do these lines should not be used to give 70 homes in the village advantage over the other 200 or the other 1,000 homes.
So if I may offer a couple of suggestions to clarify the options, at least in my mind. One is a credit on the water bill whereby the village either pays up front or pays over installment plan, and the homeowner repays the village through some kind of calculation on the water bill. Another option is an outright loan to the homeowner, with the village again paying upfront. The homeowner paying the village over a period of time. And it seems to me a third option is a grant to the homeowner, and whereby again the village is paying upfront, the homeowner is receiving a grant, and there's a possibility of forgiveness of that grant depending on exigent circumstances with the homeowner. For instance, homeowner may not simply be able to afford a grant, a loan, or a credit, but must have the pipe, the connection hooked up to the home, especially in some of the smaller homes in the older parts of Glendale. We're not talking about the mansion-sized houses, the smaller size houses, for instance, on Cleveland or Willow or Washington or Cole or Lincoln. And so a grant may be a feasible option. Alan, I'm asking if you could consider that.
I kind of like your idea of the fact that if we spend the money that comes out of actually a grant for the sewer lines and everything else, and if you have to do this and the village pays for it, what do we got? We're saying you have 120,000. How much is, I'm sorry, $2,000 per home, right? And you say, let's say you're going to add to their bill for the next, so you divide that by the months, and then you add that, divide that by 10 years, which is 120 months, and you're looking at adding $1.40 a month to their water bill to pay that in 10 years. I mean, it's almost nothing, and it doesn't. Those a homeowner that has those pipes and can do it for another $2 or whatever it is on their water bill and not have to come up with the cash, I think is a wonderful solution.
I think you have a decimal off there, Alan.
Yeah,
$13. You're right. $13.80 a month. Is that right?
no, it may be a little
I
more.
don't have, no. 2,000 divided by 12, it'd be, hold on, $166 a month. If you divide that by, it'd be $16. You're right. You're right. It'd be about an extra $15 to $16 a month for 10 years. And then that homeowner will pay that extra money. And then nobody else pays. I mean, that's just an addition to their water bill.
$16 a month, Alan. Remember, we only bill by the quarter, so that's another. It's actually $48 a quarter.
I understand that, or they pay up front the $2,000.
And
I got no problem with paying
And that's
for it.
the fourth option, and that is the homeowner opts not for the credit, the loan, grant, or any other financial assistance, but rather signs to pay for it in full upfront.
Right.
Or rather commits to paying for it in full before the installation.
Sure. That's really the only fair way to everybody in the village, basically, because, you know, those of us who live in old homes love old homes, and that's why we live in old homes. And if my house, you know, when the sewer pipe broke, I did it. I replaced it. It's something of ownership. That's part of ownership of a house.
well, there is some concern expressed for the burden of costs placed on some individuals who cannot afford it. But there are options available for assistance through the village. perhaps through the VGPI or through Proctor Fund or other sources.
Yeah, I mean, you got plenty of options here. I think that the bottom line on this discussion is we have to do something. I mean, right, Wally, they're not gonna allow us to do nothing or make, if you have to do this after this line is put in, you don't do it while they're in the construction phase, it's going to cost a whole bunch more than $2,000 for a hookup.
Well, Wally does need a decision today in order to proceed with the whole process.
Yes, I'm expecting a decision today, and so is the contractor and engineers. Let me recap what I heard from you, and I'm not disagreeing with what you said. We are required, we've already sent letters out to all the residents that are connected to this main. They are aware that we're going to, within several weeks, begin a construction site. I don't think I mentioned that to you. The road is not going to be closed, but they can get the job done much faster with the road being closed due to the Smith construction project at the bridge. So it's an opportune time to speed up what's a 90-day process into 60 days. And by the way, Rack and Ballinger will not close the road. They'll maintain traffic once Smith opens it. So we sent out letters as required by the Ohio EPA that you may have a lead line, that we will be digging up and replacing the main, that we will replace from the main to the curb stop. If you have a lead line, we're going to follow up, Kevin is, with a secondary letter, letting them know that they do or do not have a lead line. If they do have a lead line, if I heard you correctly, I'll recap it for you. We will notify them that we highly recommend that they have this company replace it, that they can pay the company, well, they could pay, we'll have to pay it because we're under contract. We will front the money, but they can reimburse us, and we'll put it as a one-time bill for $1,000 on their water bill, or we'll offer them a payout schedule over the course of time that meets with their payment abilities. Again, 38 to 40% of the people do this with Cincinnati. Some simply choose to ignore it and let the line remain. I like this option. I think it is clear that if the homeowner wants it replaced, we'll get it done for $2,000 and we'll give you a bill a week later and you can pay it. Or you can pay it over time if you have financial hardships. Concerning grants, yes, there is the Proctor Fund that could reimburse the village if they can't pay it back and they don't have the money to pay it up front. So that's a very good point. Did I understand everything correctly?
That sounds pretty good to me.
When I spoke of grants, I want to make it clear, I'm not speaking of the homeowner seeking a grant from the Proctor Fund. I'm speaking of the homeowner obtaining a grant from the village as compared to a loan. In my mind, the Proctor Fund is a totally independent organization and is not a source of funding that the village should plan on. So my comment was for the village to extend a grant or loan or some other form of credit of financial assistance for those homeowners requesting it, and opting not to pay for it, him or herself.
I understand. Very good.
Well, but let me go back a little further than you, Marilyn, on this. I still think that the letter that goes to the property owners that have lead pipes should say this is your financial responsibility. There are alternative plans that the village can help you with if you have a hardship. But we got to make sure everybody realizes this is not the village's responsibility to maintain their plumbing. And I think that that's important that we do, Wally, because I think we can help them with finances. We can, whatever, but it's still the homeowner's responsibility. And let me ask Kevin one more question. Kevin, do some of these lead lines, could they be, there's like an insert that can go in those? Would that work on some of these places? Where you wouldn't have to remove the line, you can put, I know in my house, we did a plastic insert up some of the old copper pipes for like my water pipes and stuff, my hot water heater and that kind of stuff. They just ran a tube right up the center of the old pipe.
No, the
Feasible?
No, the EPA definitely wants them removed. They're really, really pushing that issue. If we see anything when we're even replacing a line, just a break, and we see lead from our main to the curb box, we have got to replace that. We can't fix it anymore. We used to repair them years back, but now we got to completely remove them. They want them gone.
Okay, so they have to be out of the ground.
Yes.
That means they got to dig the whole front yard up.
But they don't have to. Sometimes they can bore, and they like to do that. Shoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You dig 2 holes.
I'm looking online here what the price of scrap lead is. Hey, you're going to have a lot of poundage. I mean, you're going to have a lot of poundage there.
Can you use that for your casting, Alan?
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering if we have reached a consensus sufficient enough to provide Wally and Kevin with direction that they're seeking. Can't hear you, Jeff. Jeff?
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry, my connection dropped off for a while, and apparently when it does that, it also mutes the microphone, and I was not aware of it. I heard you, Marilyn, and I believe we're making progress. Yes, I do have a question myself, though. I think the idea of the village helping to minimize the burden over a period of time, you still have to establish, do you recover that $2,000 in 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years? And I don't know how difficult it would be to arrive at a satisfactory number, but it's something that does need to be considered if we offer that option.
If I may, it's a
I
very
agree. I'm sorry, Wally, go ahead.
I think that's a good point, and I would first want to talk to Kathy Ryan, our solicitor, to get her advice on how we incur debt from a resident, what kind of agreement is necessary. And at the same time, I realize that people would have different abilities to pay. We experience that now. There are many tiers of ability to pay. And some may say, I just need a year. Some may say, I need 2 years. But I would hope we don't go too much farther than 2 years. Homeowners can change. And
Well,
we have to make sure we cover that in this letter of agreement.
I agree with Wally on the need to consult with legal counsel. I would be very skeptical of going beyond 3 years, certainly not 5 years. We also want to avoid placing a mechanic's lien or some kind of lien on the property for this installation. So that's something that perhaps, Wally, you can bring up with the solicitor.
I agree. I will do that.
And would council be setting a precedence that would say for here forward, all the other elements of replacing lead lines would be dealt the same way then?
I think that's what we're saying. We're not assuming full responsibility for that cost, Michael. Neither are we saying we're going to pay for it, but for those experiencing financial hardship and the homeowner needs financial assistance of some sort, the village is offering some assistance on the same or similar terms, dependent upon the year in which the financial assistance is requested and the value of the dollar. I mean, 5 years from now, we don't want to be offering, I can't foresee this costing $1,500 or $2,000 if this were done, say 5 or 7 or 8 years from now. I think it would likely cost more.
Well, also, if we used 2 years as a time frame, there are only 8 quarterly bills during that 2 years. And for $2,000, that is a $250 fee with each water bill, which if one budgets for that, then it can be accomplished.
Yeah, but that's better to some people. That's an interest-free loan that's better than a $2,000 check.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
But I think the committee ought to recommend that it is definitely the homeowner's responsibility, and the village will do some creative financing for each individual on an individual basis. And that should be taken care of by the village on how they want to pay for this over if they can't pay for it up front.
Does that require a motion?
So moved. Second. Wally, you see that? Wally, are you up with, I mean, you heard that, and
Yes, I've actually been taking notes, and I agree with your solution. I think it's reasonable. And I can report back to you once we find out how many lead
what
lines.
you got? Yeah.
I think, let me just make sure, Alan, you and I were saying the same thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We just got it. We have to, I think we leave it up to Wally and his staff to determine the types of payback.
And the dollar amount and the duration of whatever. Yes.
Yeah. Let's not micromanage Wally. Let him get
Absolutely.
that done. And
Oh, please do.
no. You're good with this. You
I'll
can,
get with the
That's a lot of
solicitor.
calls.
I'll get with the solicitor to make sure we're not left on the hook for something if someone suddenly sells their house. So we'll make the right document.
can I hear from Mike Bessel? What do you think? Are we going in the right direction?
It sounds good to me, but I also was going to add somewhere in the communication, if this is accurate, at this time, since it's being done at kind of in a volume basis, that this is a good deal, or, well, I shouldn't say good deal, but this is less expensive than if the homeowner had to do it all by themselves on their own.
It's a good, Mr. Bessel. I know one resident paid $12,000 to replace the headline a couple of years ago. It was terribly expensive.
Wow.
Oh, my new sewer pipe was 6.
Okay. So it may be good to mention that in your letter.
But this is the 70 homes that are hooked up to the first phase of the water replacement. The next phase of the water replacement is going to have more homes also. So we got to make this consistent, no matter how long it takes to finish this project. It's a consistent policy.
I agree,
Yeah.
Alan.
Yeah,
We need-
and I think your policy correctly does not leave the village on the hook for some unknown number down the road. It places it where it belongs with the homeowner. I think it sounds good.
Right. Okay.
I think,
Could I just,
You want to vote on that motion,
could
Jeff?
I get a point of clarification here? Just
go ahead.
one other question. Are we saying that if homeowners are indigenous or not, no, wrong word, but
Financial hardship.
if homeowners cannot afford the cost, even on their water bill in 2 years, then is it the committee's desire that the billing period, the time period, could be extended longer to reduce the monthly payment or quarterly payment? Or is it the committee's feeling that the village should chip in and pay part of the cost itself?
If I may respond, I perceive that, firstly, I think it would take longer than 2 years if we're, for the money we're talking about, and for someone experiencing financial hardship. If we give them the option of, say, up to 3 years or less, they may opt to repay it over 1 year or over 2 years or over 3 years. If at the end of, near the end of that 3-year period, or say 2.5 years going into this, the homeowner is still experiencing financial hardship and needs to refinance, refi, in short, refi the balance of the loan, then that decision is made then and there at that time. It to me depends upon whether the homeowner has been making payments and something has come up that intercedes and makes payment difficulty, or a homeowner that has not made 3 consecutive payments is already in default and behind on paying. This is over a 9-month period since the bills are
Marilyn,
on a quarterly basis.
I don't know if the village is allowed to loan money to villagers. And Don, you might check on that. But I think that Wally, you would be able to say, here's the bill, it's $2,000. And if you want to pay it over 12 months, it's this much additional to the two bills you're going to get. 24 months, it's this much more. 36 months, it's this much more. And they can choose how they want to pay for this. You know, they can 2 years, or, you know, either like in 2 years, it'd be $500 or $1,000 a year. That's $500 a billing period.
Right. I want to also, they may want the option of having it assessed to their property taxes, which we do by ordinance fairly often. So that's another option if that's
Okay, we can do that.
deductible that way. So maybe that's a choice for them too.
Well, wait a
So
minute.
we're looking at a grant repayable in a number of ways. But to answer Don's question, the village does not pick up the cost for the balance of that loan.
Okay, I wanted that clarified. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your feedback. I'll proceed. And just as an update, Rack and Ballinger wants to start in 2 weeks, and we're working through the details. There is a hiccup in the process. Mr. Chairman, may I speak about it now on the Albion Crossing?
Yes, please. Yes.
So very briefly, and I think we have a solution at hand. During the process, the engineers discovered that we had 7 bids, and they were, of course, higher than we ever expect, but the lowest bid was Rack and Ballinger. And in the loan amount we can get from the Ohio Water Development Authority was potentially going to be exceeded. So they took the liberty, and I did not receive communication on this, nor did Kevin, that they set aside as non-perform, replacing the water main on South Troy to Warwick. I learned of this yesterday with Kevin when we met with as a pre-construction meeting and stopped everything. I had to explain to them that the South Troy is not an option to remove, that they had chosen that we should do a crossover pipe at Albion to connect Greenville over the South Troy. I told them they have their priorities reversed, that anything that should be set aside if we're over the loan amount would be the crossover on Albion to Greenville. And they should put back the South Troy main, which doesn't connect to Sharon Road, and then put in fire hydrants along the way to give that area the proper pressure and flow. So the engineers are currently working on switching that back out so that is still a high priority, as we discussed at prior committee meetings. And mechanics, I won't bore you, but let me get 2 minutes of your time. When we put in Warwick, we required the contractor to put a new 8-inch main leading from Warwick, turning left on South Troy, going to Oak Road, connecting to a 6-inch main. But we used the name because we anticipated, as Mr. has mentioned, what's the schedule? So we anticipated that we are going to replace more mains. Let's standardize an 8-inch minimum, which is high capacity, high volume, and high pressure. The goal was that next time we have a round of water main replacements from Warwick going to Sharon, when we replace Sharon, we'll then connect this series of 8-inch mains that lead to the 6 and super pressurize that area and give the fire protection plan we've been seeking on both Green and on South Troy, Warwick, Albion Avenue. There are not one crossover under the tracks. There are 2. There are 2 4-inch pipes, one of them just south of the train depot, 4-inch, and one of them at Albion Avenue Crossing, 4-inch. Each of those pipes equals 12.4 cubic inches capacity. If you add the 2 together, you come up with approximately 25 cubic inches, and that equals a 6-inch pipe. The problem is there's not enough water on South Troy, which isn't connected to our main, to flow a decent amount of water over to Greenville. Thus, the priority really needs to be connect a new 8-inch main on South Troy all the way down to Warwick, so that those 2 4-inch pipes can now receive abundant pressure and volume. And then let's do an engineering study and see if we solved our problem there. If we didn't, we can put in the 8-inch down the road. But the engineer looked at our data and was impressed that we had done our homework on it and said, we'll switch this out and we'll get the priority back in place.
That's what I want to hear.
Somehow I knew that.
So they bid on the wrong design?
Up the bird bath at the corner of South Troy and is it Cleveland or Willow? Okay,
No, I think when they did, Mr. Bogran, they did their CAD study, they left out that there was a secondary 4-inch. I knew it from my 30 years here, and it doesn't easily show up on the map. So once, and they're rerunning the CAD now, by the way. Once you add the other 4-inch and you get the equivalent of 6 going across, it's still a problem until we put an 8-inch South Troy and connect it all the way down to Oakland. And they believe that that problem will be solved, and we can just take that off the list. Obviously, when we go up Sharon Road with the new main, we're also going to connect to Greenville Avenue, which comes back down to Greenville. So that's going to incorporate into the CAD study to see if it solves the low flow fire hydrant problem on Greenville. I believe it will. I'm confident that it probably will as well. Kevin, do you agree with what you said?
Yep.
So the scope is changing, but the price will remain fixed.
Yes, I want to trade out Albion for the South Troy. A point I made to the engineer that if that's a more expensive project based on time and material, because we've already had those prices quoted, they can't change them. We already got those prices. If that's more expensive on the trade-off, we've got the 150 that we were going to use to replace all of the lead services and pay for it. So that's a bit of a reserve to make sure that we can fund it through this 1.37% loan. I'll know more on this on Tuesday, and I will write a report sent to the full committee.
thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions regarding the lead lines or the Troy Avenue Albion issue? No. Okay. And then we can move on to the agenda. Am I being heard? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. The mute is clear. Okay. On the agenda, the topic heading was economics, and I wanted to address further the conversation we had at the last utility meeting, in that we acknowledged that we had some I call it water loss issues. As we all know, the water department operates at a loss, and a significant part of that loss is due to the fact that we pump much more water than we sell. And David, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Would you mind putting up that one chart, please? You have seen this chart, I believe, but I wanted to put it up again because it does illustrate, I think, visually the significant issue we have with the loss of water. That's a 10-year chart. And if you can look at the numbers, and I have not included the latest two billings, which would be qualified as 2020. But as you can see, we billed 57 million gallons of water in 2019, and we can't account for 90 million. Some part of that 90 million is used by the wastewater plant for backwash and the flushing of the fire hydrants. But regardless, it brings us down to, let's say, 70 million gallons a year, which is a significant amount of water. And the costs that have been established by Kevin and Phyllis and Wally are that the chemicals and maintenance costs, et cetera, for producing water are about $200,000 a year. So if based on the current readings, the last two readings, we're billing at a 50% level, we are still losing $100,000 a year in lost water. The engineers mentioned in our last meeting that there was a possibility that this was due to slowing meters. As ours are now, 15 years old, say 15, 16 years old, and they have, I believe, a standard lifestyle of about 10 years. Is that right, Wally? He's on mute.
Jeff, what was your question, sir?
The accepted lifestyle of a water meter is about 10 years. Is that correct? Or
That's the max.
I think 20 is the max. You should look at them from 16 years to 20, and definitely.
okay, got it. Thank you. I personally, I'm not an engineer, and I am not in agreement with the engineer's evaluation that the slow meters could contribute significantly to the amount of water we're losing. Because if you look at our chart and go back to 2010, when the meters were only 5 years old, and 2011, 2012, et cetera, that gap has remained pretty consistent. The meters have always been billing at the same rate. If you look at the blue line, which is our billing figures, it's fairly consistent. The meters are not up or down significantly, and they do parallel essentially the total amount of water we pump. So the important thing is to cut our costs and to get down to the point where we are in the what's accepted as normal range of a 15 to 20% annual loss. And we need to take action. I know Kevin is already doing that to begin to identify the cause and how to fix it.
Can I ask a question, Jeff?
Please.
I asked Wally and Kevin again.
You're on
We are. It looks like we're pumping 148 million gallons between 18 and 19. How much of that water? How much are we treating? What comes back to us? How much comes back to us?
I would have to look that up, Alan, to get you the correct number from the wastewater plant.
Right. The billing gallons is 57 million in that year. The pump gallons 148 million. Where is it? I mean, I know that the question is where is it going, but that's 3 times the amount of water that we're billing. So that's a bunch of water that's going somewhere. And I doubt if that much water is going into the ground.
3 times what we go.
Alan, are you talking about 148,000
No, that's 148 million gallons.
gallons?
Yeah.
You're using the word millions, and I'm looking at hundreds of thousands.
No, I'm looking at if 148 million gallons, and we charge for 57 million.
That's correct.
And that's a lot of water that's going somewhere other than our homes and our businesses.
So your point is well taken, Alan, that if you looked at what comes back through the sewer, you could confirm at least that if all that comes back is the 58 million, it is all getting lost somehow to ground. If you're getting back close to 148 through the sewer, then there's something wrong with the meters, perhaps.
Well, but if
I mean, it can kind of help tell you, is it escaping all of the plumbing, or is there something wrong in how it's measured? You see what I'm saying?
yeah, twice as much water is being lost.
Yeah.
And I don't think, even if you had every house leaking water, I doubt if you could leak that much. I'm wondering if it's just,
Maybe this is our groundwater problem, Alan.
Includes all the water.
could be. Kevin, what do you think it is?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I don't think it's going anywhere in the ground at all. It's been pretty consistent throughout. I went back until like in the 90s and was looking at the records, and we're pumping roughly the same amount we were then as we are now. So we've had a water loss at that point for how many years. It's really a loss. I can't dig the ground. It's not going into the creeks. We fixed 13 of them last year that we were unaccounted for. I'm sure there's some out there, but I have a hard time believing that we're losing that kind of water, because if we're going to be on an average, we should be like an average about 150,000 gallons a day. I've never seen that. We're at usually around 300 to 350 is our average. Right now we're about 4, since it hasn't been raining at all. And give our water.
Have you ever been under 300,000 a day?
Very rarely. Never been in the hundreds unless the plant was off for a certain amount of time.
I mean, you can leak into an aquifer. I mean, that's, we've got an aquifer under Cincinnati. So, I mean, you could leak right off the main into the aquifer and you'll never see that. So,
Yeah, but Mike, we are pumping this much gallon.
oh, I know. But
I mean, so we're pumping it into our pipes that go to our homes.
Yeah. But between the water plant and, us, that's a long length. And if you've got leaks through there and it drops directly into the aquifer, let's say under 675, you'll never see it.
So let me ask Kevin.
In 19, I wonder it's a huge spike. Does this have anything to do with water main breaks?
Was it last year? Yeah, I think last year was
that's what Kevin wants to talk about a little bit. That spike, that was the year we had the 13 water main breaks.
We had about 600,000 gallons a day going in January. So that's like a drought in August is when we get those spikes. In the backyard, so we found that and fixed that.
That was one of 13.
Yep. And then we're also talking, because I got pricing going on for remote meters, and talking with him, as much as we estimate billing could be another huge loss, because we're just guessing low bills and be using. I mean, that's another. We could bring that water loss down as well. So we're technically not losing it; we're just losing it through the billing.
It's a good argument.
Let me ask one more question real quick, Wally. In 2011, it says we build 82 million gallons. How come we're only building 58 million now? What's changed?
It's different every year, Alan, and that's why we keep the reserve in utilities, because we'll have good years and bad years based on rainfall and people using water for irrigation. Basically, 3 ways that we use water. What Mike touched on, Mike Bessel, is that the meter's slow. When we replaced the meters back in 2004, the manufacturers of the 3 people that bid on it suggested we get a 30 to 35% improvement in our billing, but in fact, we got a 7 to 9% improvement in our billing. We were disappointed. So meters are a way to show that you have a water loss because you're not metering it. The other 2 ways you lose water, because it does leave the plant. There's no question about it. We get out of the aquifer, it goes to the pipe, the 10-inch pipe, and it goes up Sharon, and it's distributed through a series of new mains in the new subdivision, a series of very old mains in the old subdivisions. Those mains and the joints can leak. And Kevin bought equipment 2 years ago and found all these leaks in 2019 and made the improvements among the water main breaks we have.
Okay, Jeff, I've got to excuse myself for just a couple minutes. I'll be right back. Go ahead.
Let me ask.
I got one more thing. The technology of his equipment is limited, but there are specialty companies that can be hired And now that we've increased our water rates, then we can start going after these things. This can become a high priority to hire a company to come in and say, here's a map of our water mains. And we have them here, we have them digitally, showing every water size and the age. We can have them go out and take a quadrant, a quarter of the town, and do a very thorough bore testing, little holes they drill over the main every 10 feet, and find out if there are leaks that our equipment can't pick up. We suspect. What's exciting to Kevin and I is that when we dig up alongside the old main to put the new main, we're not going to depressurize it. We're going to see it under pressure, and we're looking forward to seeing what kind of leak we got on that 106-year-old main from Chester Road going to the town hall, because it's indicative of what the smaller 6s, 4s, 3s, and 2s are in the rest of the village. So if we find these perforated holes and 400 small leaks that add up, we'll have a good idea. Should we go do listening tests or should we not? And the third way water is lost is we have a lot of in-the-house meters on our old houses. In the old days, all meters were in the house. So as we discussed previously, the homeowner begins at the sidewalk and goes to the inside of their house where their meter starts flowing. Our new homes have meters at the beginning of the homeowner's responsibility. So when there's a leak, it's metered. Leak detector goes off, we see it, it's on the first bill we see, and we go notify them, you've got a leak between the meter and your house, which is their responsibility. But the older houses, not so much. They could have a leak that's undetected, bubbling in their yard that people think it's just a wet yard. It can go on for years. And that's our water because it's not being metered, but it's leaking in their pipe. So when you do the sound testing of all the mains throughout the village, you would also include in front of where the meter connection, the valve box is that goes to the inside of the house, and also listen there to see if that particular homeowner's copper, metal, or lead line is leaking. So am I correct?
Yep.
So Jeff, the opportunity is $100,000 a year.
Currently, yes,
Yeah, so that sounds like a big number.
it is. It's $1 million over 10 years. Over these 10 years we're looking at, obviously, it's $1 million.
So I have a question for Alan. I'm sorry, for Kevin and Wally, and they may not be able to answer it offhand. If they could get back to the committee, I'd appreciate it. But I'm curious as to what happened that became effective in the year 2013, whereby our billed gallons were substantially lower in the year 2013. And since then, it's been going on a downward slope.
Credit.
No response right now. Just if you could.
I'm at a loss because Loretta was the administrator. I can get with Kevin and see if he knows, and we'll get back to you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, if I may, to continue with the agenda, the listing is the actions, and we've discussed those in some part already. Wally and Kevin have ordered test water meters already, a dozen of them that will be applied to some selected water meters to test them for their accuracy. And once those are tested, those 12 will be moved to additional homes multiple times in order to get a better percentage of tests. But that should show us whether, in fact, the meters are significantly short of billing. And that is a step that is in process by action being taken by Kevin already. One of the things mentioned while you were absent a moment, Alan, was that there are services available that will test for small leaks. Obviously, the big ones are easy to find, but I think that something we need to do in an action plan is to schedule a longer-term test of the meters. Wally, I think, is in the process of checking the cost of replacement remote meters. Ultimately, since our meters need to be replaced every 20 years or sooner if necessary, it may not be worth waiting because the remote meters have several advantages. One, of course, is that if they give us better accuracy, that's a plus. But also, it would cut down the cost of labor to read meters, which is an estimated 20,000+ per year to manually read meters in the same technique as the 1940s or 30s. So that is an action plan that is already in effect. In addition to the fact that it is a remote read that can be done in a matter of hours and the labor costs, it would also give us the opportunity to have meters read in gallons, as I understand it, as opposed to hundreds of cubic feet that the residents don't translate well. I know I don't. So it'd make it a little easier to understand your water bill. Next topic is the pressure test that I think Kevin alluded to a few moments ago. If in fact there is a water leak, I'll call it that, in the main between Chester Road and the plant, and as Mike mentioned, could be drifting into the aquifer, we will have an opportunity to test that. And it's something that needs to be done, because if we've got a leak in the 1.5 or 2 miles of meter of main that have been replaced already or being replaced, that remaining 1 or 1.5 of 100-year-old plus meter certainly could be the culprit, and that will be tested, and it may be necessary to get even more sophisticated equipment. Is that true, Kevin? Is my evaluation of your pressure test, is that going to give us a good clue?
I believe that it will, and I'm trying to plan on doing that next week. That's on the agenda for me next week. So we're finishing years probably by the beginning of next week. So by the end of next week, I should be able to do that pressure test for you, and I'll give you the results. And the leaking, yes, our equipment can get us started in an area. And then there is a organization that we join annually to. I think it's like $800 a year, and they will come out with a correlator and hook it up for free, and it listens to that area at night when there's not a lot of water usage, and it can narrow down that. And that's probably an $80,000 piece of equipment that they just come out and we can use that and borrow that for no cost at all.
Great. And if there are in fact 400, 500, or 800 small leaks that are hard to detect, and in fact may be contributing to this loss, we will take action to find those.
Yes.
So overall, the last item under actions would be, let's target a date for achieving a 15 to 20% loss of our total pump amount produced. And I suggested 2023. I don't know whether a year, 2 years is enough to accommodate that, to achieve that. Is that a reasonable target, Kevin?
That 23, probably not. I mean, it's just, you're going to be starting to talk budgeting too. If you say you have 300 leaks out there, it's going to cost a lot. That's just going to be up to the finances on that end. It's just hard to say. We can find a doozy out there and you might be able to cut it down.
Back to Mr. Bogrand's comment, a schedule of replacing mains. That's a very important thing to have, but we don't have empirical data that we can create that priority list. So if we find out that there are a dozen 110-year-old mains in a historic district that are leaking like sieves based on Kevin's use of sophisticated equipment that triangulates where these leaks are. If one main has got 400 leaks on it, it needs to be replaced. So I would think once we know that data of where we are with what mains do we have to replace, then I would think a schedule could be accurately projected.
And I plan on doing that too next month, and I'll report back to the leaks that we have in our system that are out there, and then we can see where they're at and discuss it from then.
Okay, I would suggest that we plan on making a action plan over the next for the next few years to achieve the goal and put it down so that we can measure our progress.
Yeah, it should be a high priority for sure.
Okay. Any questions on those topics? Comments?
Excellent. I mean, that's really good. I think, you know, if we could reduce that $100,000 loss to the village and therefore to the residents, I think that would be really good. Plus good press for, you know, for the village that we're trying to really minimize costs to the residents by addressing some stuff. So.
Well, it would make a significant difference in our
Mr.
operational
Chairman,
losses that we
where are we on the agenda? And remind us that we have public comment with 2 residential households anxiously and patiently waiting to briefly comment.
I understand, and I think that part of their concerns could be addressed by Kevin, and he is on the agenda here to speak. So why don't we let the residents speak, and Kevin can perhaps address some of those issues regarding the backflows, et cetera.
Thank you.
Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, let's proceed with that. And then David, will you please put our guests on the line?
Mr. Powers and Mr. Jansen are already in the meeting. I'm not sure how we'd like to proceed from there, but Mr. Jansen, I do have your photos and documents ready to go when you are.
That would be fine.
Can someone unmute Michael Jansen?
Okay, I'm ready to go. I'm unmuted, I think. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear?
Yes.
We hear you.
I'm not getting. This is Mike Jansen.
Mike, let me ask you if you have a radio or something on in the room with you that is causing an echo of your voice.
Okay, can I start? Okay, can I start now?
Yes.
Please. Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we seem to be experiencing.
The only thing I have on is should I turn my computer? I'm not sure what's causing the echo.
If you have more than one computer on, you need to turn down the audio on one.
Perhaps we can move on to Mr. Jensen in the meantime.
If
Mr. Powers,
we can hear
again?
Mr. Powers while Mr. Jansen's
Let's move to Mr.
technical
Powers.
difficulty is resolved.
And Mr. Powers, your microphone is muted, Mr. Powers.
Can ICRC unmute John Powers?
Mr. Powers, you can hold down your space bar. That will unmute you, and then you can let it up.
John, you can look down your far left-hand corner. There should be a picture of a speaker and of a camera. And if you hit that, the speaker, you should be able to talk. Or microphone, I should say.
Mr. Powers, are you able to hear us? Please nod your head if you.
So on your desktop, John, you see in the lower left-hand corner a microphone? In the lower left iPad. Okay.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
There you
Great.
did.
Can you hear me?
So,
Am I audible?
You are.
Okay, too loud or not?
Good.
Okay, well, thank you for letting me be part of this meeting. I want to thank you all for what I heard you do today. I'm sure you do it every month or more. I'm very impressed and thankful for your efforts. As a citizen, this has been going on without my knowledge, so it's great. Again, my name is John Powers. I'm here on 11 Warwick Place, and my family and I have lived here since August 1991. As you know, we are kind of a low-lying part of the street down here with Marilyn and Mr. Jansen. And whenever there is excessive rainwater that I'm sure you know enters the sewer system, the whole system sort of backs up slowly, and depending on our elevation, it will enter our houses, normally through the floor drains, which we found out very quickly was our weak spot. Over the years, we renovated our basement, and so we have a lot of property to protect down there too. Our reactions to this situation have been just defensive. We put in a removable plug in our floor drain, and when we installed a toilet down in the basement a few years ago, that didn't work. So we installed a backflow preventer in our sewage line in our basement. And I wanted to just let you know that I know you're working on this problem, and we'd love to have it solved so we didn't have any backups or even attempted backups. And our backflow preventer does protect our property, but I would just wanted to mention that that is not the full solution, because when that backflow preventer engages, yes, we protect our property from wastewater and sewage coming from the sewer system, but that closes us off, and we now have to protect ourselves from ourselves. If we generate any wastewater or flush a toilet while that gate is closed during a storm event, we run the risk of flooding ourselves because of ourselves. And I know that's just life with a backflow preventer, but the length of times that the Glendale or the village sewer system is backed up now, they're becoming more frequent and very long. What used to be a 30 or 90-minute episode every couple of years back in 91 or 95, they're now getting to be 10 or 20 hours long. And that's a long time to not be able to flush a toilet or wash your dishes or things like that. So my point today isn't to show you pictures of flooded basements. I know you've seen them. I just want to let you know that even with a sewage backflow preventer in place, the behavior of the village sewer system is still affecting us, even though we can now, our personal situation, protect our house from getting sewage from the outside. It stops us from being able to use our house freely. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that there's nothing else we can do. But the episodes are getting more frequent and longer, which is just the weather. But even when we're shut down, we're still under restricted use. And that's it. I just wanted to remind you that that does happen, even when people put in a backflow preventer.
Hey, John?
Yes.
Have you noticed where you live in the last 3 years it's gotten worse?
The length of the time that we're shut down is longer now, and the frequency is increasing. And I know that's just weather patterns.
Well, but that's not just weather. I think you're on the reciprocation or the reciprocal end of the construction up at the school at Bethany. I've noticed, and I'm sure Marilyn, you've noticed, that when the water comes off of there, it's coming down to the creek at Alton, Albion, and then comes right behind Marilyn's house and down to your house, I'm sure. Well,
it does.
While this construction is going on, I've noticed that we've got a lot more severe water flowing, and I think that will be corrected when the project at the school is done to a point. Now, I'm not saying it's going to solve the problem, but it ought to revert back to what it was. You know, I mean, we're not prepared for 100-year rains. This village is not prepared for that. I'm sorry. You know, when we laid out those things, it was 1870. It was all farmland, and the land absorbed the water. And now we've got more impervious surface than we need, and it goes to that creek. Now, we have discussed a number of times what the village can do to alleviate that kind of problem. And I think that this is going to, when we start looking at the new water mains and the new types of things that we have to do, one of the things that I believe we're going to have to address is some of our storm sewers that were put in the 1870s when there were 50 houses here instead of 1,000 houses. So I think we're going to have to do that eventually, and I hope we can do that to your satisfaction in the timeline that we can solve some of these problems. I see the major problem of that storm sewer system is right there behind Al Nippert's house and across from Maryland's, and that's really a clogging spot in our whole village. And I think that will, to me, that should have some high priority when it comes to what we do about the stormwater drain, and that's what's causing that problem. It's not the plumbing, it's the drains. When we get that kind of water, we're not capable of catching that much water and getting it past our utilities into the Mill Creek where it ends up. So I understand your problem. I understand your frustration. And I think the utilities and the village will eventually try to solve that problem as that problem gets, as soon as Bethany's done with their construction up there, it should alleviate quite a bit of that. But then we have a challenge to the village to look at and come up with solutions for why that choke point is the major choke point there on that part of the village. I think, Wally, I think you and Kevin would agree that's the spot.
Mr. Chairman, we
Yes.
have Michael Jansen.
Yes.
Seems to be available to us. He lives right next door to John Powers, and I would like to hear from him.
Yes, I wanted to thank Mr. Powers for joining our meeting and for his comments. And I think that Kevin will have some response to help pursue that problem. And let's then move on to Mr. Jansen, please.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, I'd like to thank you very much. I think I've cured my audio problem, so I don't hear the feedback. And as was mentioned, as Marilyn mentioned, I live next to John and between John and Marilyn. We've lived at this address since 1991. One thing that might help is when our house was built, the floor of our foundation was built on the existing elevation of the property. So when I say, I've got a little statement I'm going to go through. When I say this, when I say basement, you understand it's not a basement in a traditional sense that it was dug into the ground. The basement itself actually lays on top of the existing elevation. We have the creek running through our yard, and it's parallel. It's a creek that runs parallel to Warwick. When we purchased the property, we had a small bridge built across the creek to access the other side of our yard with the riding mower. The first occurrence that we had of sewage backup in our basement was January 3rd in 2000. The backup damaged, so we went from 1991 to 2000. The backup damaged carpeting and some other items. At that time, I purchased a small to pump sewage out out the back door when this occurred. But then we ended up resorting to plugging our basement floor drain, plugging our shower drain, and then as the water flow continued to increase, we resorted to sealing off our basement toilet. And then as John discussed, we avoid running water in the house during heavy rains. I guess I just want to run through a little timeline on this. In July of 2000, after a very large storm hit the area, we had our bridge was struck with a log that came down the creek, and we had the bridge repaired, and we had the bridge, well, we had it raised up to avoid future damage. We also widened the creek bed and took other measures to reduce erosion because of the increase in water flow that we saw. In January of 2004, Kathy sent a letter to Mayor Todd and Mr. Cordes about our experience in the previous 2.5 years. She explained the sewer backup in our home, the disgusting waste running into the creek, and the impact of the increasing water flow in the creek on our property. We received a reply stating that major improvements are coming and all contributing factors would be eliminated. I sent with my information that I sent, and I sent copies of both those letters. At the time, we were encouraged by the correspondence and also the articles in the newspapers, such as one that appeared on April 19th, 2004, that stated that the sewer repair will get underway soon in the areas of South Troy, Albion, Warwick, and Hedgerow. This was in an Enquirer article, which I also attached. During the summer of 2004, there was a leak in an uncovered sanitary sewer pipe that runs across the creek bed to the sewer. So this is a pipe that runs parallel to, that runs perpendicular to Warwick, runs across the creek bed. And someone was sent to find the leak. The leak was found and the pipe was repaired. And the village put concrete over the pipe. The reason why I bring this up is due to the erosion in the creek. The pipe is again exposed. And I'd ask David if you would show the picture number 1. So this is the pipe that's in the creek bed. And okay, thank you. So we continue to look forward to the improvements that were being made, and that those improvements would eliminate our need to plug the drains and suspend water usage during storms. In November 2010, the ribbon was cut on the new wastewater treatment plant. The Enquirer recorded the following quote: "The plant is so well designed that the process will hold us well into the future. It's also expandable to handle additional wastewater stream," said Mike Howard. This is, again, a newspaper article from 2010, which I attached. Since 2010, we and some of our neighbors, as you heard from John, continue to deal with trying to stop sewage from entering our homes. We continue to see wastewater shooting from sewers like fountains during heavy rainstorms. And just to give you an idea of the force of this, if you would show picture number 2. This is a sewer lid that's down next to the creek. You can see the force of the water is such that it lifted the sewer lid off the top of the sewer. The sewer lid's been like this for a while, but and again, if anything, these occurrences of sewer overflow are becoming more frequent, again, as John mentioned. In addition, we have seen a significant increase in water flow in a creek. The additional water flow continues to cause more and more erosion. There's a large section of broken pipe in the creek and large pieces of concrete in the creek. If we get picture number 3. Again, this is, you can see this is what's down in the creek bed, these pieces of pipe that were broken off, as well as the pieces of concrete. A few weeks ago, we incurred at least $1,000 damage to landscaping in our backyard. For the first time since we moved in, I put sandbags by my back door. We have a walkout from our basement again, because of the rising water. And I'll show some pictures of the water in our backyard. But this occurred in spite of the fact that this rainfall did not anywhere near match the 2001 storm. And since that time, we had significantly widened the creek bed and taken other measures to, we thought, improve the water flow through our yard. If you could put up picture 4 and 5, I'd appreciate it. This is what our backyard looked like. Up at the top of the screen, what you see is all the way at the top is the creek, and then you can see it's where the stones are in the upper right. Of course, that's in our yard and should be that area should be dry. And the damage that was done, the flow of the water was so strong that it took out a significant amount of that gravel path that we had just put in over a year ago. So, and next picture, please. So it's basically the same picture, but you get it just a little bit from a little bit different view. But again, what you're seeing here is the top of the picture is very top is where the creek is, and probably at that point in the water in the creek is, oh gosh, I'm going to guess 4.5 feet high or something probably. Alan, one thing you mentioned to John was about Bethany. I can't go by without making a comment about that, because it seems that that's clearly part of the issue with the increased stormwater flow. And I say that because when we have a heavy rain, one of the first things I notice in the creek is there's a lot of dirt suspended in the water. And that's, my background is finance, nothing to do with engineering or landscape or anything. But that would tell me, though, that there's obviously a lot of runoff coming from something that looks like a construction site. So, and we walked, Kathy and I walked up that way, and you could tell by walking up hedgerow and walking through there that there's obviously a lot of water flow coming down through there. So we knew it had to be coming from someplace. But I just wanted to give you some idea of what we're dealing with. And from our viewpoint, even though there were supposed improvements, I guess, 10 years ago or whatever, the situation just continues to get worse and worse. And I'd be glad to take any questions if there are.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the hour is passing, I realize, and that our 90-minute meeting is now past time. I'd like to particularly thank my neighbors and my friends, the Jansons and the Powers, for speaking. It took an awful lot for them to do this. It takes an awful lot for any homeowner to speak about water problems that they are experiencing. There are others on Warwick Place who prefer not to speak out openly. So what we're hearing and seeing from the Jansons, I think, is felt by not only others on Warwick Place, but possibly by many more homeowners throughout Glendale. I would ask, and I will work on this myself, that the village look at the CARES funding that's being appropriated to see what funds are coming to municipalities to address and update its sewage and wastewater distribution, or whatever the system and source is called.
Marilyn, can I chime in on that now? We pay a fee to the wastewater, don't we? Wally, you can chime in on this. We actually have a service that we pay for that should be able to look into this specific problem and give us some advice. Is that right, Wally, or am I wrong?
Are you speaking of Hamilton County Soil Conservancy District?
Well, no, I thought we were involved. Well, maybe it is. I'm not too sure, but there's something that, don't we belong to the Hamilton County wastewater? And what is that we belong to, that we pay?
I think if we're addressing stormwater, it's Hamilton County Stormwater District, which we do charge residents on our tax base to be an active participant and help us engineer and investigate. But if I'm on this topic briefly, Mr. Powers and Mr. Jansen, Kevin asked me while we were on mute listening to you that he would like some boots on the ground time with both of you to come out and visit with you, look at your houses and get a better understanding. I know that he's aware that there's a washout on the steel sewer pipe that we need to make corrective measures to, so we'll certainly have to get permission from somebody to go on your property to make that repair. But he's very knowledgeable, and he'd like some boot time to be more up to speed on what your issues are, so to see how we can reach out administratively as we work into the long-term corrective measures. What can we do now to assist both of you? So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask him to reach out to you.
I'd be glad to do that.
Mr. Chairman, the hour is truly passing and I must leave. There are others in my household that I need to be considerate of with Zoom video conferencing meetings. May I request that the wastewater treatment plant, as well as what we've heard in the public comments section, be continued into our next meeting when we have more information from the administrative staff?
I would like to just ask Kevin if he would like to take a few moments, if he has something to say very briefly. I had asked him to join the meeting to address the concerns that have been expressed. And perhaps there's nothing more you can add, Kevin, that's fine. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to reply.
Yes, first of all, Mr. Jansen, Mr. Powers, sorry that you're dealing with what you're dealing with. We were trying to figure this out for sure. Problems that's one of the main lines that comes through Glendale. Comes from Woodbine, the historic Glendale. So we know there's probably some I&I issues up there. We are definitely going to be trying to locate those. We might have one here, and I'm going to find out in the next week or two that there is some pipes that are kind of mysterious that are in our wastewater at one of our manholes. So we need to find a dye test the catch basins in that area where you have smoke test, and smoke has came out of those catch basins. So if those are essentially tied in, all that stormwater is going into the sanitary, and that would be a huge find on alleviating some of those problems that you are having. And that's what we're trying to do. And I know it's a slow process, but it's trying to find all these is it's like underground detective. It's hard because you can't see anything, but we will try to take care of that. Is for sure.
Kevin, how do you get out to them? Could you folks email Kevin, or could he have your emails to contact you, or a phone number? How would you like to do that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I must leave, and I appreciate the conversation, but I must leave without being disrespectful.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. If you
Thanks,
need
Marilyn.
a motion to adjourn after Mr. Cordes speaks, so moved.
Second.
Kevin, David has my email address.
Kevin, I'll find your address and email you.
You're on mute.
A little secret about our emails. It's our first initial last name at glendaleha.org. So it's K-Bell. It's
Hey, what? I'm sorry, Bell?
Bell, B-L-L, Kevin Bell. It's just K-Bell.
Okay, I'll email you.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn, and I believe it was seconded, correct, Alan?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's consider the meeting adjourned then, and thank you all for attending another long session. I think it was worthwhile.